You know how sometimes you'll just throw your chalk container in your gym bag and the next time you reach for it, your chalk's all broken up? Well, I got tired of that, so I designed this thing to hold my chalk in place so that doesn't happen again. Now, this is something I've been wanting to design for a long time now, ever since I got my first 3D printer, and I knew nothing about CAD when I first started, and only now am I just getting better. So this went through a lot of trial and error to give me something that is barely functional. I see a lot of videos where people put in a lot of effort into their prints, and I did put a lot of effort into this, but it's really just a combination of trial and error to fit a very specific chalk in a very specific piece of Tupperware. Now, if you're like me or like a lot of other powerlifters, you usually grab the first Tupperware that you find in your place. In my case, it was this small 710 milliliter or 3-cup Rubbermaid Tupperware that I put my chalk in. And actually I have this really nice Friction Labs circular chalk that I use all the time that I really like. And obviously this isn't sponsored because I would not be sponsored at this time. But I had my chalk in this container, and you know, when you just throw it in your gym bag, it'll move around a lot, especially if your gym bag is shaking around a lot. And you end up with a lot of broken pieces, which actually isn't too much of a bad thing because I know a lot of powerlifters prefer loose chalk, right? So that way they can really get the powder all over their palms. But if you're a powerlifter, you know how important it is to have something solid, something more like a puck or a block shape, so that if you're ever wearing chalk for a competition setting, or if you're wearing a singlet and let's say you want to put chalk on your back, it's a lot easier to do with a puck or with a disc or with something solid than it is with loose chalk. So that's why I have solid chalk. It's this puck from Friction Labs. And in order to prevent it from sliding around all over my Tupperware, I designed this. And the idea is pretty simple. It goes at the diagonal of the Tupperware to keep it supported on the side so it doesn't move around, and the chalk fits nicely in the hole. Now, the original idea for this kind of had these spikes at the end to hold it more securely in place for the Tupperware, but the problem with those is that without something super accurate for this specific Tupperware, i.e. some sort of scan that I could really contour these edges to, it was a good idea in theory, and I'm sure it would work in practice, but there was no point doing that unless I can make it really accurate. Not only that, but my CAD skills were very limited. I basically didn't know how to use CAD, and I picked up Tinkercad for the first time just to design this piece. And if I really wanted to make it as accurate as possible, I knew there would be two options. Number one would be to try to download some sort of free LiDAR scanner from my phone, using the LiDAR on your phone camera to just barely get some sort of scan that you could use to design the piece. Or number two would be to invest in some sort of entry-level LiDAR scanner that I could use for future builds if I ever want to scan something and design something based off of a real-world object. I really like that idea because I'd be able to use it for any future purposes. So naturally, from the two options, I decided to go for option number 3. Just trial and error everything until it works out. Because as we're all familiar with the popular saying, cut twice, measure once. Which is why I say we have something that's just barely above functional. It fits, it moves around a little bit, but it doesn't move around too much, and it's just good enough for someone like me to be able to design. The interesting thing is, as time was going on and I was making this build, I actually did decide to take an approach to an actual CAD software, and I started to learn FreeCAD, which, after understanding how the sketch design function works and padding things out, made me realize that if I had known this at the start, this project would have been a lot easier. And even though I still wouldn't have had an exact model of the Tupperware, or would have been able to do anything useful if I had that exact model, being able to dimension and constrain everything would have made things a lot easier. And near the end, I even tried to recreate the build in FreeCAD, and you can see the exact moment where I give up on that and just go back to Tinkercad, because the undimensioned and unconstrained trial and error approach meant that I had a Tinkercad design that happened to fit in my Tupperware that would be really hard to translate to other design softwares. So I just decided to stick with Tinkercad, even if it came back to bite me at the end, because cut twice, measure once. Now, the ideal for this print was I still like having loose chalk in my Tupperware, and I still like having these smaller pieces so I can break off and really get all of it into the crevices of my palm instead of just having a block. So the idea was to kind of divide it into two, where you have your main piece in the center, your smaller blocks up at top, and any loose powder falls into the bottom so that you can kind of pour it out at an angle when you want to get loose chalk. The biggest difference between this penultimate version and the version I have is that you'll see this version has a little block at the end that kind of extends upward right here. It's probably the only other functional thing I added here, because the idea is if you ever go to pour out your chalk like this block is going to want to fall out. And without this rectangle, it would be really hard to hold all three pieces at once and pour out your chalk. So what you can do is you can kind of press your thumb on the edge of that block, hold the puck down with your thumb, and with your other finger, hold down the other piece of chalk so that you can pour out the loose chalk without any falling out. And the only other thing you'll notice is this really small hole in the middle for a magnet to go through, so that you can place a magnet on the bottom right there, and it holds it in place mildly more. You super glue the magnet, you place the magnet in there which didn't even fit. I just kind of had to wedge it in there, and it's a little bit more stable and moves around a little bit less, ignoring this rubber foot that I also placed to stabilize it a little bit more, which I try to put on more sides, but again, because the Tupperware kind of flares and is curved, it was really hard to get it to stick. This one happened to stick, and I decided not to place any on the other sides because at the end of the day, this is merely a functional build, maybe slightly above functional. I wasn't really trying to go for something super accurate because not only do I not have the tools, but I probably don't have the skills to do that if I did have the tools. And there you go. That is my chalk holder build. Now, as I said, this is just barely above functional, but there are definitely ways this can be improved, which if there's anyone watching this, if I happen to reach the intersection of powerlifters and 3D printing enthusiasts, the biggest improvement you could obviously make is actually scanning a Tupperware like this to get all the dimensions and using CAD skills that I don't have to actually contour the build to fit in all corners nicely, which leaves us with the 3D printed chalk holder. And maybe I'll even use my skills to do another 3D print solving more powerlifting problems in the future. And maybe now with my free CAD skills, it'll be a little bit easier to do that. I can't think of any other powerlifting problems I can solve right now, but if something comes up, that'll be a really fun thing to design. But that's about it. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I've included the print files in the description if anyone wants to print it, if anyone has the same chalk and has the same piece of Tupperware. The magnet component is a little bit hard because I dimensioned it for the magnets that I just happen to have. So obviously if you have magnets that are a different size, it might not fit, but it's barely functional anyways. The magnet just barely adds more stability, so I don't think you'll be missing out. If you want to print it and try it out, let me know how it goes. If anyone wants to redesign it and improve on it, I highly urge you to, because that would be awesome. But until then, I will be using this to hold my chalk to make sure it stays mostly in one piece, provided the whole Tupperware doesn't bounce up and down in my gym bag. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.